Our service from the Unitarian Society of Northampton and Florence. I'm Julie Kinsman. I'm a member of the pastoral care team and the welcome team. It's wonderful to see you here this morning in the Great Hall and online. Thank you to everyone who is helping to make the service happen this morning. If you are new or returning after a time away, we're glad to see you. Feel free to fill out one of these blue welcome cards. They're in the back of the pews. You can put it in the offering plate later in the service. There's an online version that you can find through the link in the chat. We'll put you on our email list so you can receive information about all that we do. We strive to be a congregation that welcomes people of all ages, races, religious beliefs, backgrounds, sexual orientations, gender identities, and abilities. We belong to the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and we are guided and inspired by its values and principles. Our values and principles move us to remember that those of us in the Pioneer Valley live on the unceded homeland of the Pecumtuck, Nonotuck, and Western Nipmuc peoples. Those values remind us to acknowledge our responsibility to confront the legacies of dispossession and systemic racism that are part of our collective history, even as we also affirm and celebrate the many legacies that inspire us. At the entrance to the Great Hall, you will find a table with different ways for people of all ages to use your hands during the service. We stream our services on Zoom and YouTube, and there's a camera in the balcony that looks down in the Great Hall and shows people's heads from the back. We understand that some people may prefer not to be seen on camera at all, and we suggest that you choose one of the 4 or 5 rows in the back of the hall if that's the case. We're here to celebrate, to reflect, and to support one another. It is good to be together, and now we'll begin our service.
Who can say, I have purified my heart and am free from doing harm? There are none on earth so righteous as that. I long to cast away the harm I have done. I long to seek a new heart and a new spirit. Today is the day to remove the heart of stone from your flesh. Today is the day to welcome the heart that feels. Now I invite you to rise in body or in spirit for our chalice lighting, and then we will stay standing for the first hymn. Please join me. May this flame remind us that forgiveness is not an act, but an attitude, not a duty, but a form of love we offer ourselves. May it burn this hour to celebrate the ever-unfolding new beginning. Jessica, just a sec. Ed, is there a problem with the video?
Yes, there is.
No?
So the video needs to be on in here in order to see.
All right, we'll wait. And now, you may have noticed that we sang that song last week. We did. We're experimenting with a couple new things this fall. We're planning to have one opening hymn of the month. And we'll do that of the month means at least 3 of the 4 or 5 Sundays, maybe all of them. And we're trying to choose accessible songs that everyone can learn and sing easily. Then we'll have the story, and then followed by the greeting, and then we'll sing the children and adult helpers out to religious education activities. So that gives a little more time for what happens downstairs, all the wonderful things that happen downstairs to happen. And another change is actually a return to the way we used to do things pre-COVID. And that is we're inviting families and anyone else who would like to see the pictures from the book rather than on the screen to come forward for the story. So we hope that some of you will want to do that, and Jessica and I will be happy to see you up front now. Uh-oh.
Well, ooh, I think this is working. Have to sit on the floor, and you also don't have to come up, but folks of all ages are very much invited to come listen to the story close up. It is also going to be projected on the screen, as you can see. And the story this morning is called Harriet in the Garden by Nancy Carlson. And this is related to the themes of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And for me, it's nothing that I've actually experienced, but I can definitely relate to knowing that I need to apologize, but having a really hard time with it. Oh, I was hoping you would hold it up and I can see it. We're still figuring out the logistics. Will you try it? Here, we're experimenting as you see. Can you hold it like that? It was a beautiful summer day. Harriet was playing ball with some pals. Across the park, Mrs. Hoositt was working in her garden. Mrs. Hoositt had been waiting for this day for a long time. Her prize dahlia was in full bloom. I must call the garden club and have them come over today and have a look, she said. Raise your hand if you have prize dahlias. Does anybody here have prize dahlias? There's some prize dahlias out there. Meanwhile, Harriet was playing outfield. Suddenly, George hit a fly ball. Harriet just had to catch it. If she didn't, it would be a home run for sure. Harriet ran back and back. She kept her eyes on the ball. She was concentrating so hard that she never noticed when she came to Mrs. Hoositt's garden. She ran backward right through the perfect mums. Then she trampled the lilies. And as you're probably all anticipating, the dahlias. In the middle of the rose bushes, she caught the ball. And then she fell down right on top of those prize dahlias in full bloom. Oops, said Harriet. Let's get out of here, said her pals. Everyone ran except for Harriet. She had that freeze reaction. She looked around her at the garden. Everything was ruined. Suddenly, Harriet heard Mrs. Hoositt's voice. What's happened to my beautiful garden? Any guesses what Harriet decided to do? She fled. Harriet was so scared that she just took off. She ran and she ran and she never turned back. She ran all the way home, up the stairs, into her bedroom, and slammed the door. Maybe she didn't recognize me, thought Harriet, but she decided she'd better spend the rest of the day inside. You'll notice she wasn't even close to the window. Are you all right, Harriet? Mother asked. Just fine, said Harriet. That night, Harriet couldn't eat her supper. Her favorite television program wasn't very interesting. She didn't even care when Mother made popcorn balls. When Harriet went to bed, she couldn't sleep. I'm feeling stressed out for her. And when she finally fell asleep, she had bad dreams. The next morning, Harriet made a decision. She went straight to Mrs. Hoositt's house and confessed. Then she spent the rest of the day helping Mrs. Hoositt plant new flowers and tie up the broken rose bushes. They had a good time. When Harriet got home, she was a mess. Harriet, are you all right? Mother asked. You can see she's going in for those popcorn balls now. Just fine, said Harriet. You can all breathe a sigh of relief.
Something is wrong. I apologize to everyone on Zoom that you can't see my beautiful face. Oh, there it is. Ay, ay, ay. You know, It really isn't so bad being one of the tech people here. It's really kind of fun. It's, you know, you're kind of in a group of people who are all muddling through. And so we're very grateful to everyone who's doing this. And if anybody wants to join the team, you are welcome. This is a new year for many people and a new year in the Jewish tradition. The High Holy Days began just this past Friday night with Rosh Hashanah, a 2-day holiday that celebrates the new year. And during the High Holy Days, many Jewish people engage in a process of doing a moral self-assessment, seeking forgiveness from others for harms they've done, making amends as appropriate, and resolving to do better in the future. And at the end of this time comes the holiday of Yom Kippur. It's a day for fasting and religious services, and it's the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. So today I'm drawing on the writings of a rabbi named Danya Ruttenberg, whose book On Repentance and Repair was recently published by the UUA-affiliated publishing company Beacon Press. She writes this: Jewish thinking on repentance comes originally from legal writing about Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. A long time ago, Yom Kippur was the day on which the high priest purged the ancient temple in Jerusalem. He purged it of ritual impurity and made expiation for himself, his family, and the Israelite people. It was a clearing out of sin and a spiritual purification. And then that second temple was destroyed by the Romans in the 70th year of the Common Era. And it was at that time that Judaism shifted and the more personal sin-clearing aspect of the day became even stronger. It became a general day of repentance. And she goes on, the word traditionally translated as repentance really means something more like return. Returning is a restoration, as much as possible, to the victim of harm. And it's also for the perpetrator of harm, a coming back in humility and intentionality to behaving as the person we might like to believe we are. Our second hymn is the beautiful Hashivenu, number 216 in the gray hymnal. And the words mean, turn us back, O Lord, to you, and we will turn, we will renew our days as before. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing. Yep, it's you. It's you, baby. Don't do anything. Ignore this.
I will ignore that. Good morning. My name's Joan O'Brien, and I'm co-moderator of the Coordinating Council, which I will henceforth refer to as the Council. Just easier. Twice a year, we at USNF select organizations to share our Sunday Plate collections. The decisions about which organizations to support are made at the council meeting and are based on nominations by members and friends of the congregation. At the council's October meeting, one important item of business will be to select the organizations we'll support through our Share the Plate collections from now until the end of January. Then we'll vote again. We invite suggestions of nonprofit organizations whose work aligns with the mission and principles of USNF. If you'd like to nominate an organization for consideration as a Share the Plate partner, please email your suggestion to council@northampton.org, or you can email me directly, Joan O'Brien. It's all in the directory, ideally within the next 10 days, so we can have everything ready for the meeting. You're also more than welcome to attend the meeting and take part in the discussion. In fact, anyone attending the October 2nd council meeting will be able to vote on the nominees that have been submitted for consideration. So submit, show up, vote. And then in the interim, if you nominate somebody, an organization will probably ask for a short blurb. For those who don't know, the Coordinating Council is where members and friends representing our congregation's programs, committees, work groups, and staff come together to share information about what we're doing, what we hope to do, and to discuss ideas and raise concerns about our community. Anyone who has an interest in the goings-on of our community is welcome to attend these meetings. Importantly, while the meetings are a place to conduct USNF business, they're also a place where we nurture our community. These council meetings are held on the first Monday of the month from 6:30 to 8 o'clock via Zoom. If you have any questions about the council or would simply like to chat about the council, feel free to reach out to this year's co-coordinators of the Coordinating Council, Lori Loisel and or me, Joan O'Brien, at council@uunorthampton.org.
Thank you, Joan. So as Joan said, as Joan said, we share our Sunday morning offering 50-50. Half of it goes to support the work of the congregation directly, and half of it goes to organizations that the congregation chooses in the outside community. So we're also, as many of you know, in the midst of a capital campaign to fund replacement of all of our 5 furnaces, count them, 5 furnaces with heat pump systems. And if we exceed our goal, to invest in other decarbonization projects and other building projects that are needed, such as taking better care of our stained glass windows and other things that are on the House and Property Team list. So if you, there are pledge cards in the back. And if you want to drop one off, you can give one to one of the ushers at the end of the service. You can put it in the offering plate, or you can bring it back to the office at the end of the service if you happen to want to fill one out today. Otherwise, we'll be collecting them for the next couple of weeks. Our morning offering will now be given and very, very gratefully received. pointed out that we forgot the greeting. So I think you should greet each other now. Why don't you stand, say hello to everyone on Zoom who are back there. Hello, everybody on Zoom. And then we'll take a minute to greet one another. Hello, all you people on Zoom. You're the ones I forgot to greet. And Gil, hope you're doing well. Who else is there? Hey, Sherry. Hi, Wendla. Hi, Sally. Hey, Steph. See, I knew there was another Dahlia aficionado here. Kathy Braden. Hi, Steve. Teresa, good to see you. Gail and John. Kamala. Claire, who else is there? Julie, Mary.
Can you turn up the volume on the mic?
I don't know what he did. All right, this is a day for technical glitches. I don't know why. Technical and non-technical glitches. All right, we'll try that. Can you hear me now on Zoom? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. All right. The problem's in the hall then. Thank you all. Great to see you. Can you hear me better now? Yes? Okay. How about now? Yes? Okay. All right. A couple people were saying you're having trouble hearing, so. You can hear that. All right, let's take a breath. For our meditation this morning, we have a litany of forgiveness, which is a sung litany. You have the response, and I have the spoken words. So Ellen will play it for us just once, and 10:37. You don't want to look at it because you'll have the wrong words, so ignore that. Please rise in body or spirit, and we'll sing. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For failing to be kind when kindness was needed. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For speaking harshly when we should have been gentle. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. And for remaining silent when we should have spoken. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. We're making assumptions when listening would have led to greater understanding. For our acts of indifference and putting our own needs first when other needs were greater. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again. For our our failures to remember that we belong to one another. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again. And for whatever in each one of us most needs to be forgiven. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again. Let's be seated and take a moment together in silence.
Like a bird on a wire, like a drunk in a midnight choir. I have tried in my way to be free. Like a worm on a hook, like a knife from some old-fashioned book. I have saved all my ribbons for thee. And if I have been unkind, I hope that you can just let it all go by. And if I have been untrue, I hope that you know it was never to you. Like a baby stillborn, like a beast with his horn, I have torn everyone who reached out to me. But I swear by this song and by all that I have done wrong, I will make it all up to thee. I saw a beggar leaning on his wooden crutch. He said to me, don't ask for so much. And a pretty woman leaning on her darkened door, she cried out to me, hey, why not ask for more like a bird on a wire, like a drunk in a midnight choir. I have tried in my way to be free.
We sang, "We forgive ourselves and each other." And it feels right as an affirmation, as an expression of generosity and a resetting of intentions. We need to forgive and we need to be forgiven. And this is what Danya Rutenberg writes about forgiveness. She says that the word forgive in English comes from an Old English word, forgifan, which translates primarily as to give, to grant, and to bestow. And one Old English dictionary actually connects it to the Hebrew word for gift. She says, forgiveness is a present that's offered, something that's granted to someone freely without necessarily a conversation about whether or not that person who is forgiven has earned it. So it's a kind of an offering. Forgiveness, she writes, is regarded as a universal good, as something we should give freely, regardless of whether the perpetrator of harm has done the work of repentance, regardless of whether they have fully owned their harm, regardless of whether they've done any work of repair, regardless of whether they have done any work to change and make changes in themselves. And she says, American culture emphasizes letting go of grudges and redemption narratives instead of attending to the specific obligations of a perpetrator of harm and the recompense due to one who has been harmed or traumatized. And I have been really struck by that as I read her book. Those who have been harmed are asked to forgive too quickly. Forgiveness is too much of an expectation. She says that coerced forgiveness, or forgiveness that follows a lame apology, forgiveness without sincere repentance on the part of the one who has done the harm, is not only toxic, she says it can be lethal. So she is inspired in this book by the teachings of the 12th century Jewish philosopher and rabbi, who in English is known as Maimonides. Born in Spain, he was a theologian, a philosopher, an astronomer, and a physician in both Morocco and Egypt. And he was one of the most influential Torah scholars of his time. This was the 12th century. His teachings about forgiveness and repentance are included in a book called the Mishneh Torah, which is a 14-volume commentary on Jewish law. And as we heard, the word traditionally translated as repentance really means something more like return. And returning is a restoration as much as possible to the victim. It is for the perpetrator of harm a coming back in humility and intentionality to behaving as the person we want ourselves to be. So in the system that Maimonides maps out, the first step is naming and owning the harm we, or in some cases, our family or forebears have caused. She says if we can't see or say what we've done, we can't identify what we need to change. So I actually see the recent practice of naming the tribes whose ancestral lands we now inhabit as a tiny collective first step, a way to just bring that history of dispossession into our awareness. And there are lots of examples. Another example is in this morning's story, of course. The more Harriet thinks about and dreams about what she's done, ruining Mrs. Huset's garden and worse, running away, the more she takes in the wrong and the harm that she's done. The second step in Maimonides' system is to then begin to change our behavior. So the way to do that is to notice when we're in a similar situation to the one where we've caused harm, and to try to behave differently. So it's interesting, the second step isn't really primarily or even sometimes at all about making amends directly to whoever it is we've harmed. It's actually a move towards our own transformation. And because in order to keep from perpetuating the harm we've done, we have to change. That can really have applications in our personal relationships, I think. Because otherwise, Rutenberg says, there's only the same harm again and again, perpetrated in different ways. So, thinking back to Harriet, they could move the ball field, or they could make an out of bounds rule so that you don't have to go back and back and back and back and back to make the catch. It's either a ground rule home run or it's a out of bounds. The third step in Maimonides' system is accepting consequences and making restitution. Whether or not the people we have harmed forgive us, we need to find a way to restore and repair. And he says, this was a long time ago, 1,000 years ago, it's only after or in the context of all these steps that it's time for an apology. Danya Rutenberg says, a real apology is not aimed at the person who's been hurt, but rather it's given in relationship with them. It requires vulnerability and empathic listening, so you can see why you had to do some of that work yourself first. It demands a sincere offering of regret and sorrow for one's actions, even sometimes when the victims are no more. And it goes further, even if the victim refuses to accept our apology, we're expected, at least in the beginning, to accept this refusal as a gift, as a contribution to our learning. So these are the steps. We name and own the harm, begin to change our behavior, accept the consequences, make restitution, then make a sincere apology, and then continue to make different choices, resolve not to repeat what we've done. And all of this in these teachings is true repentance, a process which again requires us to understand that other people's needs and pain are at least as important, if not more important, than our own. So in her book, Rutenberg offers stories and studies of how these repentance and repair works in individual lives. She talks a little bit about the criminal justice system and restorative justice examples. Talks a little bit about attempts to address wide-scale crimes, Germany's work at coming to terms with the impacts of Nazism, a little bit about the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commitment, and then about work that's has been underway to redress wrongs done to the Dakota peoples in Minnesota, a little bit about reparations for Black America. All of those world-scale, massive crimes are doing that work is long, hard, daunting work, and also critical work. And I think this is an interesting perspective on what's needed. But on the personal, a couple things on the personal level, she tells a story about a young woman named Alex Wall, who back in the 1980s was a college student on her way to spend a semester in Israel. And on the last night home, she went out partying with people she didn't know. She met someone who told her that he had a gift for an Israeli friend. It was an old family heirloom, and he didn't want to send it through the mail. Would she please carry it with her? And so it was all nicely wrapped up in a package. He wrote the friend's name and address on one side, and he wrote his own name on the other. And when she got to airport security in Tel Aviv, she was pulled aside, detained, questioned for over 5 hours, It turned out the family heirloom was actually a packet of drugs. So she was lucky that they released her without a lot more hassle, but that incident left her feeling angry, used, cheated. And she didn't have any way to express her anger with the person who had wronged her. She didn't have any way to find and contact him, had she even dared to do that. It soured the rest of her experience, her time in Israel, and it had a lingering effect that still nagged at her even years later. So I have my own story, one that really belongs to our son, Dan. He had a summer internship one year when he was about 15 in the next town over, about a 5-mile bike ride from where we lived. And riding home from work one day, he was pulled over by a police car. And he was angry. Angry. They asked me what I was doing, he told us, and it was none of their business. I said, "Did you say that?" He said, "I'm not stupid, Mom. I asked them to tell me why they had stopped me, and the cops said there had been a series of break-ins in the neighborhood, reportedly by someone who fit my description. What do you suppose that meant?" Well, so for those of you who may not know, our sons are biracial, and we all had a pretty good idea of what that meant. And then he told us what happened next. He said, "I said, do you want to look in my pack?" And he said, I was pretty sure that the cop knew. He could tell that I knew he wasn't supposed to do that. So they told me I could go. So what kind of harm was done to our son, our 15-year-old, in that all too common situation that often ends with more than emotional harm done, as in his case? In retrospect, I should have been frightened instead of just angry myself. So we asked him, should we go to the police station and make a report? And he just said, no, we'll just let it go. So we didn't push. Rutenberg says American culture emphasizes letting go of grudges instead of emphasizing the specific obligations of a perpetrator of harm and recompense due to one who's been harmed or traumatized. So think about that in your own lives. What happens to the harm that's done when someone's victimized for so many reasons has to simply let it go? And why do we let it happen so often? I was talking with someone about this recently, and she said, well, we're conflict averse. Maybe, but there's something about that idea of maybe it's just built into our culture. When one of my children was teased, looking back, or worse, I wonder how many times they heard, I'm sure he didn't mean it, or that wasn't a big deal, or you just need to forgive and forget. I'm sure they heard it over and over again. I can hear myself saying it. You've probably heard it. Sometimes I was right. But I'm sure I also heard that same kind of thing myself growing up. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill, right? So suppose we had gone to the police station to express our concerns about what had happened. I can't imagine Dan would have gotten an apology, at least not the kind that would have addressed the harm that had been done. This was 20 years ago. It's more likely that the response would have been, you misunderstood, you're just doing our job. And think of the kind of non-apologies that kids give all the time when they're called to task, say for teasing. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean anything. It was a joke. So the story about Alex, the college student who took a semester in Israel, that actually ended differently. After 20 years for her, the experience still rankled. She hadn't forgotten his name because it had been written on the back of that package, and now she had a way to find him. So she looked for him on Facebook, and she found him. And he responded immediately. He thanked her for getting in touch. He told her how sorry he was. He told her over and over again that he apologized. And he told her everything that he had done over the past 20 years after this had happened. Rutenberg writes, he was thrilled and relieved to hear from her. He hadn't known her name. He hadn't known how to contact her. And he had been racked with guilt for years. He had spent time in therapy trying to figure out how to move on, given that he didn't know how to contact her to make amends. And Wall said he hadn't touched drugs since because drugs turned him into a kind of person he didn't want to be. He owned what he had done, and he was transformed by his desire never to cause harm like that again. That's an amazing story. True apology, says Rutenberg, is about trying to see the human being in front of you, to connect with them and communicate to them, to make it clear, absolutely, abundantly, profoundly clear, that you now get it, and that their feeling better matters to you. Your apology is then a manifestation of genuine remorse. It's an apology that demands vulnerability, and it's a natural byproduct of all the work and repentance and transformation that you've been doing up until that point. She says, or Maimonides said, only then can an apology be real, truly genuine, given in relationship to the person harmed, with vulnerability and empathic listening, a sincere offering of regret and sorrow for what we've done. And so quick apologies that are quickly accepted by those who are behaving as the culture expects them to, as the culture expects us to, don't do anything to transform or heal either the harm doer or the person harmed. So think about that. Are there times when you were hurt where real repentance and repair might have helped to heal you? Are there times when maybe you forgave too soon? So the full title of Rabbi Rutenberg's book, Danya Rutenberg, is On Repentance and Repair, Making Amends in an Unapologetic World. And it is the book that's the UUA, our National Association, suggests for this year's Common Read. So I hope that some of you may be interested in reading it and then coming together for conversations about it. We would all be and do better than we sometimes are and do. We all long for a world that is safer, kinder, more just, more sane, more forgiving. May we find a way to continue learning, and may we be gentle with one another. Our final hymn this morning is the New Year's hymn, O Hear My People. It's number 219 in the Gray Hymnal. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Not sleeping?
Today is a day to cast away harm we have done, to seek a new heart and new spirit. Today is a day to remember that life is a gift and to be grateful for it. Go in peace.